It happens over 600 times every day. It appears as a commercial on TV or the radio. Maybe it's an advertisement in a magazine, the newspaper, or a billboard on the side of the highway. Maybe it's a fundraising letter you get in the mail from some politician. Well, it's persuasion. And efforts to persuade you occur at an average rate of once every 2.5 minutes every single day. And because persuasion is such an ever-present part of our everyday lives, it's pretty important for us to understand how it works. You know, what are the principles of an activity that can shape your attitudes and your behavior? What do car salespeople know? Advertising copywriters, politicians know about how to change your thought and influence your behavior. Well, what we're going to talk about is how persuasion works, and not only will this information help you become a better persuasive speaker, it's going to help you become a better recipient of persuasion, because you'll start to understand some of the things that people are using on you to help them influence you. So let's start today with the definition. What is persuasion? Well, persuasion is the process of changing or reinforcing audiences' attitudes, beliefs, values, and or behavior. So basically, you're trying to get us to behave in some predetermined way. You're deciding at the advance of the speech that you want us to think this way or do this thing, and you build your speech around getting us to think that way or do that thing. So first of all, what are the goals of persuasive speaking? Okay, if you remember when we talked about informative speaking, we had the goals of understanding and retention when it came to informative speaking. Those goals don't go away. We still want the audience to understand and remember, but we have some goals that are very specific to persuasion. And as we covered that definition just a minute ago, we actually touched on those goals. But let's look at each one of those a little bit more detail. All right, so one of the first goals we may have with the persuasive speech might be to influence attitudes. All right, so a long time ago we defined attitudes, beliefs, and values, but let's do that again. First of all, what is an attitude? Okay, so this is how we respond favorably or unfavorably towards something. Basically, it reflects our likes and our dislikes. So we form our attitudes based on experiences. For example, you go to a restaurant and the food is good, service is good, price is right, and you leave there and going, hey, I like this place, and you have a favorable attitude towards it. But as we understand the audience's attitudes and how they form those attitudes, we're going to be able to better influence those attitudes as we develop our argument. Now, the second goal we may have with the persuasive speech might be to influence beliefs. This is how we accept things as being true or false. So if you believe in something, you're convinced that it exists. And so we structure our sense of what is real and unreal to account for whatever we believe in. So in terms of things being true or false, did or didn't happen, does or doesn't exist, those would focus on your beliefs. Then the third goal might be to influence values. Now, value is our concept of good and bad, or right and wrong. And, you ask yourself, what do you value? Different people value different things. Maybe things such as honesty, trustworthiness, freedom, loyalty, marriage, money. We form values based off of our society, our culture, our religion, our education. And we found that values are more deeply ingrained in the way we think than attitudes or beliefs ever could be. Because of that, we find that a value-based argument is the most difficult to change or influence than the other two. Beliefs, you just have to prove it. You have to provide the facts to prove something true or false. And attitudes, they can really sometimes change on a whim. So they're the easier of the three between attitudes, beliefs, and values. Now, we may have one additional goal, a fourth goal, beyond changing attitudes, beliefs, or values, and that might be to influence behavior. So yes, you want to change the way we think, but you want us to actually do something about it. You don't want us just to agree that littering is bad for the environment. You actually want us to adopt a highway and pick up trash on the side of the road one Saturday every month. So influencing behavior may be your ultimate goal. Now, in order to persuade the audience, we've got to motivate them. In other words, we've got to give them a reason to change the way they think and the way they behave. So we've got several ways we can motivate an audience to be persuaded. The first method we can use is kind of the theoretical one, and it's called Dissonance Theory. Now, dissonance theory is based on the concept that we all strive to act in a way that's consistent with our attitudes, beliefs, and values. So, for example, if you have a positive attitude towards a restaurant, you go eat there, right? So that's what dissonance theory is based on. So what happens is, on occasion, we're acting, positive in conjunction with our attitudes, beliefs, and values. We're faced with the opposing viewpoint, okay? So we come across somebody who has a negative attitude towards that restaurant. Well, when we face this opposing viewpoint that's inconsistent with the way we think or behave, it creates kind of an imbalance in the thought process. It creates an uncomfortable feeling. This term is called cognitive dissonance. Now, literally, cognitive dissonance means disagreement in the mind. But what it does is it causes us to kind of question our position. Another example of cognitive dissonance might be fear. So let's say a security alarm company, they create this cognitive dissonance using dissonance theory. They create a fear in us that our home may be broken into or somebody may harm us, but if we install a security system, we're going to be safe and protected, and so therefore it kind of helps us eliminate that cognitive dissonance. And that's what happens. The person who has experienced that cognitive dissonance, they want to feel better. They want to get rid of that uncomfortable feeling. They want to get rid of the fear, for example, and therefore they do what you advocate to get rid of that fear. And so in that sense, what they're doing is they're buying the security system or buying insurance, or they start exercising, or they stop smoking, or whatever it is that you're advocating we do to make themselves feel better and get rid of that uncomfortable feeling, that cognitive dissonance. Now, another way that we can motivate an audience is by using needs. Now, Abraham Maslow, he identified all of the needs that basic humans had, but not only did he identify those needs, he put them into a hierarchy, understanding that certain needs had to be met before other needs could be met. We can appeal to Maslow's hierarchy of needs as well within persuasion to get people to think the way we want them to think and do the things we want them to do. So let's look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The most basic needs, the bottom level that all humans have, are what we call the physiological needs. This is like air, food, water, okay? So if you've got somebody who is literally starving to death, meaning if they don't eat, they're going to die, they're not real concerned about their self-esteem. Maybe a prisoner of war is captured and they're interrogating that prisoner and they want them to give up the location of their troops. Well, perhaps they withhold food and water from them until they get to the point where they're about to break, and in order to survive, they give them the information that they want. Now, once the basic physiological needs are met, your listeners are concerned about their safety. So we have the safety needs, and we all have that need to feel safe, secure, protected. Think about insurance companies trying to sell insurance. They may show you a picture of a wrecked car, a burning house, somebody laying in a hospital bed, and of course they tell you that these things are terrible, but if you have our insurance, things are going to be okay. And so they're playing off that need for safety and security in terms of meeting their goal, selling their product. So whether it's appeals to use seat belts, stop smoking, start exercising, all of these play into our need for safety and security. Now next, we all want to feel loved and valued, so we have what are called the social needs. And these translate into our need for a sense of belonging to a group. Humans are very social animals. People do not want to be left out. And so, therefore, an advertiser might encourage us to buy a product or support an issue because why? Everybody else is doing it. And so, therefore, to be liked and accepted by others, we need to be doing the same things that they are. Then come the self-esteem needs. These reflect our desire to think well of ourselves. So now an advertiser is going to flip things a little bit and tell us that we should buy their product, because if we do, that we're going to be noticed by others or stand out in the crowd. Be the first kid on your block to have the new video game or whatever it may be. And so therefore that lifts our self-esteem. And then lastly, we can appeal to the need for self-actualization. And self-actualization is that need to achieve our highest potential. Everybody wants to be successful. They have an innate need and desire to do that. And so if we think about the old slogan for the United States Army, as it stated, be all you can be. Be all you can be. And that was a direct appeal to self-actualization. If you join the Army, you're going to achieve whatever your potential may be. Now, the next thing that we can do to motivate an audience to be persuaded is an appeal to positive motivation. And this is just a simple concept where you say, if you do X, good things will happen. If you start exercising now, you're going to live a longer, healthier life. If you start saving money for retirement, you're going to be financially secure when you get ready to retire. So if you do X, good things will happen. Now, on the other side of that, the last thing we can use to appeal to the audience, to motivate them, is an appeal to negative motivation or a fear appeal. Now, these fear appeals are much stronger than the appeals to positive motivation. And basically, you're saying if you don't do X, bad things will happen. If you don't start exercising now, you could become unhealthy and die early. If you don't save money now for retirement, you could be financially broke by the time you get ready to retire. Now, because they're so strong, a lot of research has been done towards appeals to negative motivation. Here's 3 key things about fear appeals that you need to keep in mind. First of all, a strong threat to a loved one is greater than a direct threat to you. So if you're making an appeal to wear seat belts and the appeal is like this, if you're in a car accident and you're not wearing your seat belt, you could be injured or even killed. Well, you may take some action on that, but what's stronger in terms of the emotional appeal is that if you're in a car accident and your children are not properly restrained, they could be injured or even killed. The reaction will be stronger to that second appeal. The strong threat to a loved one is greater than a direct threat to you. Secondly, the more competent, trustworthy, and respected the speaker, the greater the effect of the fear appeal. So in other words, if it's somebody who you trust and believe that tells you not to do something, you're more likely not to do it. And then finally, fear appeals are more successful if you can convince us the threat is real. Maybe use some statistical data to show us how common a problem may be and how it really could affect us. And then if you can have me saying, this concerns me or this could affect me, then I'm more likely to take action on it. Now, when we think about the fear appeal, well, what does the fear do? The fear creates cognitive dissonance. So we go all the way back to dissonance theory at the beginning of this. We don't like the feeling of fear, and so therefore we're willing to do things, maybe change our behavior, in order to eliminate that fear. Now, let's change gears just a little bit and get out of theory and talk a second about the actual physical process of developing the persuasive speech, maybe how it's similar and different to the informative speech. Of course, with the first step, audience analysis is important. You've got to know where your audience stands, how they formulated those ideas and thoughts as you go into the development of your argument. Clearly, topic selection is especially important. I cannot overemphasize making sure you have a position on your topic in terms of making that argument if you want to truly be credible in what you're advocating. If it's necessary to narrow that topic for the time you have, make sure you do so. Clearly, controversial issues make good persuasive speech topics. You just have to keep in mind how you approach that controversial issue. If you're trying to advocate, say, a vegetarian lifestyle, you're going to find it more effective if you approach that speech from the medical health related side, telling us the health benefits and studies and things like that, rather than saying, hey, if you eat meat, you're nothing but a murderer and a killer. That's not going to endear me as a meat eater to your argument. So you also have to make sure that this topic, even if it's controversial, is arguable in that sense of make sure there is clearly 2 or more sides to the issue. So you can use refutation, you can provide support for your side of the argument and so on, just like using the example of domestic violence. So you want to argue domestic violence is bad. Well, yeah, domestic violence is bad. I don't think there's anybody that's going to argue against you that domestic violence is bad. But that's a one-sided argument. So what you have to do is turn it into a problem-solution persuasive speech, which is the most common form of persuasive speech. and you have to convince us of the significance of that problem, and then you have to advocate a solution to it, meaning what do you want me to do about it? What changes do you want me to take in order to help solve this problem? Now, as we move through topic selection, we then have to determine the purpose of the speech, just like with the informative speech. And clearly the general purpose is easy, that's to persuade. The next thing that we would have done if we were writing an informative speech would be to write a specific purpose, but we're not going to write a specific purpose. We're going to write something called a proposition statement. Now, the proposition statement kind of works the same way. Basically, the proposition statement is a statement you want us to agree with at the end of the speech. And as you write this proposition statement, it's a complete sentence, it's a declarative statement, and it's, again, the goal you want to achieve once we've heard your argument. Now, not only do we have to write this proposition statement, we also have to classify it into one of three types. First type of proposition might be a proposition of fact. So this is if you're making a belief-based argument and you're trying to prove something's true or false, did or didn't happen, does or doesn't exist, you're going to have a proposition of fact. So for example, talk radio is directly responsible for violence against U.S. government agencies. Children who are abused by their parents are more likely to be abused by their children. So as we basically make those statements, then we have to provide evidence to support those. Proposition of fact. Second type of proposition is what we call a proposition of value. So this is where you're trying to get us to make a judgment about your topic. In other words, something being good or bad, something being right or wrong. So these tend to be these value-based arguments. So for example, it is wrong to turn away immigrants who want to come to the U.S. Democracy is a better form of government than communism. Speech communication is a better major than history. And so you're basically advocating one thing being better than something else, and you just have to provide enough evidence so that as we weigh one side or the other, we side with you. Then thirdly, we have a proposition of policy. This advocates a specific action. And so if your speech in the end advocates us to actually do something like write a congressman, pick up trash on the side of the road, volunteer time, donate money, buy a product, if there is an action statement as a part of your argument, it moves it into proposition of policy. Our community should set aside one day each month as Community Cleanup Day. Senior citizens should pay for more of their medical costs. Our state should seek more block grants from the federal government. So you see that should word in there tends to advocate that action. So the question comes up from time to time, can it be one, more than one? Could it be proposition of value and proposition of policy? No. If you have that action statement, it's going to move it to policy from value. So it will only be one of those three. Now, finally, let's put these persuasive principles into practice. We've looked at a little bit of the theory behind it, and we've taken a look at some of the physical steps. Here's some things that we need to keep in mind as we start our way through this process. First of all, persuasion will be more likely to occur if you do it gradually rather than suddenly. What I mean by that is you've got to build your case. If you hit me right from the very beginning, tell me the way I think is wrong and I'm going to change your mind today, we may not be receptive. But if you create a tie to the audience, you show we share common ground, and then you build your argument over the course of the speech, you're more likely to persuade me to change my position. Make sure you put your goal in terms that are consistent with your audience's attitudes, beliefs, values, and behavior. You've got to find that common ground. So if you're going to do a speech advocating a group of smokers quit smoking, okay, you may find that approaching it from the very beginning saying, we all want to live a long, healthy life. I mean, your audience is not going to raise their hand and go, no, I'd like to die tomorrow, please. No, I mean, that's something that's common ground that you can find amongst you and your audience. Clearly, persuasion will be more likely to occur if the advantages of your proposition outweigh the disadvantages. There's going to be evidence supporting both sides as you make your argument. You've just got to use refutation, where you provide evidence against the opposing viewpoint as you go through your argument, so that in the end, again, when we're weighing both sides of that issue, we side with you. And then finally, persuasion will be more likely to occur if it meets the needs of your audience. If you can find a way to appeal to any of those 5 levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you find out what we need and offer that in return for doing what you advocate, we're more likely to be persuaded.